Hey folks, it's time for another edition of Which One Works. In this series, I take a look at a few of my photographs and critique them for you so you can see a little bit of what I look at and evaluate in my own images before I decide to process them and eventually share them. So this is a wonderful little insight into some of the details that I look at when evaluating images. Sometimes it's just a small difference between one or the other. So I just got back from doing a one-on-one workshop over the last couple days here in the Pacific Northwest, and we had a chance to explore some of the wild spaces and do some creeking and look for some fall color. And so this edition is looking at a few of the images from the last couple of days. So let's jump in and take a look at what we shot. So during my one-on-one, we traveled up through the Columbia River Gorge and shot waterfalls, shot a lot of foliage, and then the next day we ended up in Washington. And one of the first stops we made was at the Cedar Creek grist mill, which is a really popular location, and oftentimes with fall color screaming, this is a beautiful photograph. When we showed up Saturday morning, not a lot of fall color. The color's really late here in Oregon and Washington right now, but we still had a wonderful time photographing in this area. Now, the first two shots I want to look at is really a matter of orientation, camera orientation. We have a horizontal, and then I have a vertical to look at. So let me talk about each one of them. In the horizontal, I moved far enough to my right where the face of this building was relatively exposed. So I wanted to make the building a reasonable element in my composition. So the story in this shot is really the building next to a creek with some fall color. Now if I look at the vertical shot, it's zoomed out a little bit, and I have a lot more river in this photograph. The waterfall's unfortunately smaller, but the emphasis in this photograph is this is a creek with a waterfall next to a building versus a building that's next to a creek with a waterfall. So notice the shift in emphasis. So neither one of these is right or wrong, but this is just to show you and to demonstrate how sometimes if you change the perspective, you can change the story. So I highly encourage you to shoot in both orientations with your camera when you can. I really wanted to accentuate the river and the S-curve in the river in this shot, and so that's why I went vertical. Found a great place to cut off the building, but in this case I wanted the building, enough of the river that it was a good compositional element, and a little bit of the fall foliage. So don't forget to change your orientation. Now at one point we stopped by a place called Hewsum Falls, which is on the White Salmon River up in Washington, and this is a great little waterfall, and we actually had a chance to see some kayakers come down this waterfall. But this is a pretty prototypical shot of this particular area. And what I want you to look at really is the water motion here. So here's the first shot. This was done at 1/8 of a second. So when you ask what's the right shutter speed for blurry water, the answer is always it depends. It depends on the volume of water and the speed of water. And, of course, what you like in your water. If you like it really soft and dreamy, or if you like it with some definition. I tend to like my water with definition because it gives a lot of visual interest. If the water here was all blurred out, so it was just soft and dreamy, I wouldn't have the cascades through the rocks right in through here. So I wouldn't be able to see a lot of that. It would just be a white, foamy, dreamy cotton candy spilling across the rocks. And with smaller rivers, smaller creeks, lower flows, and slower speeds, I can shoot 1.5, 2.5, 3, 4, 5 seconds and still get definition. But at Hewsome Falls on this day, there was so much water that I was shooting at a sixth of a second. This particular shot is actually an eighth of a second, or this is a sixth of a second. So a little bit more water blur, a little bit less definition, but it's minute. So whenever you shoot water, shoot at multiple different shutter speeds so that when you get home, you can pick the one that you like best. It's hard to know when looking at the back of your LCD screen, so it's really important to shoot multiple different exposures at different shutter speeds. And one of the ways you can do that, if you keep your aperture the same, I shot this at f/16. I just really dialed in my ISO. I went from my base ISO in my camera up to about ISO 400 and picked the one that I liked the best. I happen to like this one a little bit better. I have some great definition here, but a little bit too much definition up at the top of the river. So I like a little bit softer up here so it's not as visually impactful in the image. I want this part of the river to sort of drop away and most of your attention to be focused right down here in the photograph. And so I like this slightly softer version. Excellent. So we ventured up near Mount Adams and found a stand of cottonwood trees that we stopped and photographed. So here's one of the first efforts that I wanted to show you. I love the white trunks against the dark green background. That's what originally grabbed our eye. And then the colorful trees, small trees in the foreground, and then the grass as a compositional element. So this is the first shot that I took. I like it, but what I end up, when I got home, when I start looking at this shot, what I end up with is almost two different photographs. Because of this space in the middle, I have this clump of trees on the left and this clump of trees on the right. Now initially I would think that this photograph would be balanced because of that, and it is, but I sort of end up with two different focal points. I don't know whether to look to the left or to the right, because the gap in the middle makes me subconsciously think that there's nothing there, and I don't see them as two pieces of a whole. I see almost two separate images. So I shot this horizontally to begin with, and then I started working in the vertical orientation. Part of the reason I did that is that our subject matter here, the trees, are vertically oriented. So oftentimes I like to work in a vertical orientation with a vertical subject. And this is the photograph that I picked that I like a little bit better. So notice now I still have grass, colorful cottonwoods, and the white trunks, but now there's no doubt what I'm looking at. I'm looking at those two trees and the white trunks there. It's not two separate images, it's one image with a really solid subject right in the middle. You know what you're supposed to look at. So this is the one that works far better for me than the previous shot. We went back and put on a longer lens because I was seeing a little bit more of a forest abstract shot. I was seeing these tree trunks with a little splash of color. And I thought this might be a great photograph. So I took several frames with my 1:400 lens on, and this happens to be one of them. So this is a contender for me, and what I like about this is I've got a good amount of color here that I know I'll be able to bring out. This trunk here, very, very bright, very dominant, and it's sort of close to the third line on the right-hand side. So your eyes are naturally going to fall here and then maybe to the color, and then maybe bounce over to this trunk over here. These two trunks are the primary focal points of this image. Everything else is a supporting cast member. I've got good separation between these tree trunks, and I've got somewhat of a separation between these two trunks. Everything else is strictly background. To shoot this, I was really focused on the separation between all of these trunks because that's more important. I really don't want a lot of overlaps. So I was positioning myself to try to maximize the separation. When I did that, of course, I ended up with a little bleed over from some of the trees. And so I had a choice to make. Could I get rid of these in post? Could I live with them? Could I move my feet slightly and minimize this intrusion? So what I ended up with was this shot. I was able to get rid of this in post. I left this because it's just too much real estate to try to get rid of. And the way I got rid of this upper part is I moved my feet slightly. So notice that the trees shift a little bit to the left in this as I toggle back and forth. One of these images has been processed, this one, and the first one has not. But notice how the image shifts a little bit, the trees shift a little bit to the left, and that was the way I was able to get rid of that upper intrusion. And what that meant was I have even more space over here and even more color, which is a plus or minus, depending on how you want to look at it. So this is the one that really worked for me the best out of these. And then I'll spend some time and sort of darken this a little bit and brighten this a little bit. So these two primary trees that are my subject really are of equal tonal value, instead of this one's brighter and this one's darker. So you sort of get this dominant feeling of the one on the right and less dominant on the one on the left. So I want to even those two out so they are both equally dominant as primary subjects. We were photographing a creek, and I happened to see a shape on the riverbank, this little shape here. It's almost like a V shaped. And then I noticed this riverbank here that it sort of was almost an inverted V. And both of these were pointed right at this rock. So I shot this initial frame right here to try to accentuate the shapes in the rocks. And I looked at it on my LCD. Didn't really, the shape of the rocks really didn't come through. But the thing that struck me is that, notice the water motion, right? I have this horizontal water motion from right to left. And in a vertical orientation, there's not a lot of room for this motion to happen and to resolve itself in the frame. So that struck me visually when I looked at this through the viewfinder or on the LCD when I was on location. So I made a point to shoot this horizontally to allow that water motion to resolve itself. And again, this has not been edited, so we'll just kind of bump the exposure up a little bit and you can see it better. So we go from this was the initial shot, a little bit further back, a little bit more about the landscape and less about the water. Here is a little bit tighter and it's more about the water, a little bit less about the landscape. And our water can resolve itself horizontally from right to left. And this is the one that I prefer over the vertical orientation, which is what I originally shot and what originally caught my eye. Now, I took some time. I was standing there, I slowed down, and I was just observing some small details in the scene. And I saw this rock, I saw this leaf on this moss-colored rock with water moving around it. So I spent some time and shot several frames of this. Shot this at f/16. This particular frame's at 2.5 seconds. And if you've ever watched a creek and watched it flow around a rock, you know it's never consistent. There's always different surges. There's ebbs and flows of the water. So that's what I wanted to do, is catch a variety of ebbs and flows. And I've got 3 images to show you of this. So here's the first one. Here's the second one. A little bit less water. And here's the third one. A little bit more turbulent showing of the water. Now let me talk about each one of these. This one I like that there's enough white water that I'm going to be able to bring this out and make it a really nice visual element. The rock looks good. It's positioned just off center. I love that. So far this is kind of my winner. But when I look at this leaf, some of this water had washed up onto the rock and is sort of burying the leaf a little bit. So that I don't really care for. Let's go to the next shot. A little bit less white water all around the rock, but notice how the leaf slightly shifted with the moving water, and there's a little bit less water on top, so the leaf is more visible. So this might be a better shot. This shot I love because of all the white water around it, and this could be a really energetic, strong photograph. But again, this leaf kind of is getting washed out. Yes, there's some glare on it, but it's kind of getting washed over by some of the water. So between all of these, what I think I prefer the best is this particular one. And when I edit it, I'll be able to bring out some of that white water, bring in some of that energy of the river, of the creek, and have that leaf, which is a central focal point of this image, be a lot more resolved than in the other two examples. Okay, so the last shot, again, sticking with the creek. Loved this little scene right here. This was wonderful. What caught my attention, of course, was the spillover right in through here. A great smattering of fall colors all throughout the scene. Potentially with a long enough shutter speed, I could get some water motion or some foam motion through here. So there's a lot of this stuff that I really loved this scene. So I worked, and this is the first composition that I created. Now going back to shutter speed real quick, this was shot at 4.5 seconds. So versus that Hewsome Falls, which was a 1/6 and an 1/8 of a second, this is 4.5 seconds because there's not a lot of water. And I still got some great definition on this pour over right here. So I love this. I really like this scene in this shot. Now, if I was to pick it apart, and notice a few things, right? I love this curve of the streaks in here. It's really kind of nice, but is there enough of it? Is there too much dead space down here? Because this photograph is about the pour over and the rocks surrounding the pour over. So is this a little bit too much space down here? And are these little streaks are they distracting, or do they add to the image? Because I don't have enough of this whirlpool action, I wonder if it detracts a little bit from the image. So the next shot, a little bit tighter, same 4.5 second shutter speed, or 4-second shutter speed. I still have a little bit of trailing movement, but I've gotten rid of some of that dead space that was down here. And notice, the one thing I didn't talk about in that first frame, notice there's a little bit of a piling. This holds up a sluiceway for the grist mill, and so there's a little bit of a piling up here. I think visually it blends in enough because there's enough patina on it, it doesn't bother me. But in the slightly tighter shot, I minimize that piling even more, so there's less chance that it will become noticed by the viewer. So again, 4 seconds, a little bit tighter, a little bit less swirly motion down at the bottom. That's a contender. And then lastly, this was shot at 1.8 seconds. Notice the foam at the bottom. These are just foam dots that are slightly blurry. So I don't have trails, but I tend to like the foam dots because I didn't have enough trail action myself to really bring a motion element in. But with just slightly blurred foam dots, it gives you the impression of motion without having these distracting white lines. Have great definition in the water that I know I'll be able to bring out. I've minimized the piling. So to me, this is the one that works over the other ones. All right, there you go. There's a little bit of which one works, Creekin in the PNW. Hope you all enjoyed that. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them down below. And if you're not subscribed to this channel, please click the like button, click the subscribe button, tickle the bell, do all that kind of good stuff. It really helps support this channel. Thank you all for watching. I hope you have a great day. Keep shooting and live that creative life. All right, folks. Bye-bye.